So we're in InDesign, and you're just going to make a new document. You want to choose print and look at your presets, and yes, choose A3. Make sure you're measuring everything in millimeters, and then you'll see your measurement there is 297 by 420. We want to make sure we don't have facing pages. We only need a single document. It's not a book. And we don't need to worry about any of that. Margins are really, you can change those to suit you, but that's a kind of a standard margin. That means you'll avoid putting things too close to the print edge. So what's actually there when you get the whole thing trimmed. So, but that can be adjusted, and sometimes the printer will be telling you what that is. So for example, for bus shelter billboards, it's quite, it's like different. It's like 5 mils at the top and the bottom and 3 at the sides. It's like really different. So always consult with your printer on that one. It's like, that's your safe area. You don't want big text elements or anything on your final post design really too close to that, or it looks really crowded too. Okay, so that's that. Then the really important thing we want to talk about is the bleed. So in there, you've got to put that 3 mil, and like I said, and this one's 3 mil all round, and like I said, this could be different depending on what the printer says to you. Some places they'll say 5 mil bleed, depends what their setup is. Always take your instructions from whoever's printing it. If you don't know, and you're just handing over the artwork to a client and they're going to do the printing, which is often the case with freelance work, then 3 mils is a very standard industry thing. The slug, you don't need to worry about that. That's really where, if something's going through the printer multiple times, a sheet of paper, there's these things called grippers that go on the end of the sheet, and the slug, again, the printer would tell you allow a certain amount of slug. Obviously, we're printing this in-house on what's basically a glorified photocopier. No, it's a laser printer. We don't need that. So that's just to explain what that is. So that's, you know, when we're talking in print terms, the trim size is this. That's the size it will actually be trimmed to. The bleed is just this extra bit they do, and then that means that when they do the trimming on these giant machines with a stack of papers like that, you can imagine how many they're doing at once with the industrial machines they use. They need a little bit of wriggle room so that something doesn't come so close that you end up trimming it and you get a white, very fine white line along the edge. So if your artwork was to go right to the edge and they try to trim on that edge, you've got to imagine there's the thickness of the blade that's actually cutting, and it can be a very fine white line, but nonetheless it really interferes with the look of the final product, whatever it is. So bleed's a really important thing to consider, and there's different ways of putting bleed on. So packaging design, for example, you do in Illustrator, and there's ways of making sure you've got bleed on that. It's often you make the stroke thicker and tell it to go to the outside and then turn it to a shape, and then that becomes this extra bit that just neatly sits around the package. A lot of students will draw a great big shape. They're like, no, there are neater ways of doing it. And you can set up the trim marks for something that's an unusual shape, like packaging. You know, Illustrator has the facility to actually, you know, you decide where those trim marks go. Like you can actually put them exactly where you want. Whereas in InDesign, it's for the whole document. It's for A4s, A3s, A5s, etc. Commercial sizes.
I've always seen 3 millimeter as the bleed. Is that just standard?
That's pretty standard, but it's not everywhere. And like I say, you talk to your printer, you ask them what bleed should this have, and usually you're uploading to us, like especially business cards. Some of them say 3, some of them say 5, and they're sending you a template anyway. It's very clear what you have to do. But when we make the PDF to send to them, and we'll step through this at the end, it's output through InDesign, and you have to click a little box that says include document bleed when we make the PDF. So if the bleed's not there, or it's there but you don't tick that box, then it doesn't get included in the final output. So that's a really important step. All right? So when you've done that, just say create. Hi. Just open Photoshop and Illustrator. I'm recording this, so don't stress. Yep. Okay, so just create that, and you can see there's the bleed line, and that's where your artwork's going to go. So what we've got to think about is that in Photoshop, we need to add that bleed in, otherwise we bring it into this InDesign document, we're going to stretch it up. And if we've got something a little too close to the edge, it's going to end up in that bleed area, which we don't want. So we make our Photoshop file just that extra. So we've got to basically add 3 each side, so that's 6. So let's go and make our Photoshop file, and we'll look at making a new Photoshop file. So just flick to Photoshop. Again, you want print, and by clicking that option, you'll see that it's automatically going to be working in the color profile for print usually. If not, you're going to switch it down here to be CMYK. That's the usual thing. Okay, so let's just say it's an A3 portrait Photoshop file, and you can switch the color profile to, or actually we can keep it on that. No, just listen, that's the color profile. Let's just leave that. Anything else we have to change?
CMYK?
No, that's actually just the color profile. So that's
color mode.
Sorry?
Color mode, which is above.
Yeah, up here. Sorry, yes. So don't change that. That color profile controls how the program converts the colors from RGB to CMYK. So again, that's something, the color profile. See how many there are? You can be sent an actual colour profile that the printer wants you to use, install it, and it'll turn up on this list. If you're not told anything, RGB 1998 is a safe bet. The sRGB one is a really common one that your scans will come in with, which is okay. But again, your printer might tell you something very specific, or tell you on their website, download our colour profile, install it. It says there's a way of doing it where, we can't do it here, we're locked out of that, but at home you can install it into your program's colour profile folder, and then it'll turn up here. So don't worry about doing that now at this point. It's just to be aware what that means is, hey, I'm going to use this formula to convert the colours to CMYK. And what you're trying to do is close the loop between you and whoever's printing it. So if they've got a great colour profile to use, then why not use that? Because you'll get a better colour output. Okay, so if you don't get told anything and it's in sRGB, that's common off cameras, that's fine. However, a really common one that's used very widely for commercial print is this sRGB, this 1998. So you could switch it to that. Either's going to be fine. You can automatically start with a transparent background. I think that's a good idea. So when you're bringing files in and you're trying to erase bits of it, you're actually not got a white background behind. Now this is the bit where you've got to add 6 onto the sides. So we want 3 either side, so we can go 4, 26, and we're going to go 303. So we're making our Photoshop document just that little bit bigger so it pops into InDesign without you having to stretch it up. Yeah, so we're just adding 6. Yeah, 426 and 303 instead of the usual A3, just slightly bigger. That's pretty much all you have to do in here. You might want to name it something and then just create it.
Do we change the resolution?
Oh, sorry, did I not do that?
It's 300.
It should be 300.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. When you select print, automatically Photoshop. If I go into image size, we can check. You can see it says 300. Okay, that is the standard. Whereas if you pick the screen option, it would be like 72. So you just need to realise 300 is your standard for commercial print, but it's 300 at the size you want it. Not 300 and then I'll double it in size and then end up with half the resolution. Okay, so that's the thing. So you're set up now and you can start bringing things in. If you want, you can put the guidelines on for the 3mm. And I'll show you how to do that. So if you do Command R, that turns on your rulers. And then you can just drag in that little top corner. And this is quite useful in all the programs. You can see there's a little crosshair in that little intersection. If you drag that onto the edge of your page, doesn't matter which program you're using, that'll mean you'll be able to measure from whatever you say is naught. So we're basically telling it, measure from here. And your measurements will make sense then. So then when I drag a ruler across, I can pretty much get it to 3. And to check it, to see what it's actually putting it at, you can just go Window, Info, and you can see where that ruler is sitting at. Let me bring up the info panel. Oh, where did it go? It didn't turn up. Must be sitting at the side somewhere. Where's my window info? I don't know why that didn't show up. So this one, window info, there it is. So this is a little palette that it shows whatever you're clicking on, it shows where it's located, as well as what size an object is. So if you just play around a bit with that, you'll get it close to measuring 3. See, I've got 4. See, it's got X, Y. So, as long as I've got something on there, I'm close to it. And that's going to just help me. Even if it's at 4, that tells me, look, that's where the edge. I just got to make sure I don't put anything any closer than that. And if you want to be really fussy about it, you can put guidelines on for the margins as well, but it's not really necessary. The main thing is to understand where your bleed is, but it's what's called a safe area, the other one. So this is like your bleed, your 3mm. Yeah, so and if you want to get rid of a ruler, you just drag it off. And the good thing about this, the Command R works in every program, and you can drag rulers from the top as well, so they'll be horizontal, and that will be the y-axis measurement. So, just see how you go. You should just plonk a few rulers on the page and go, okay, I'm not going to go beyond that. Or if you find this too fiddly, you could just go for the margin measurement. And margin measurement is basically the safe area. Okay, so I would put at least a guideline on to the edges, so you go, okay, I really mustn't put my image any closer than that. So it'll look something like this. And if it's jumping, if your increments are too, like mine's jumping too much, I might have to go back to the Photoshop menu and look at settings and look at the way the units and rulers are working. So you can make your rulers not jump so much. You can decide how they measure. If that helps you, you can switch that to millimeters. And then because we're trying to measure in millimeters, we don't need that. It's just the millimeters for the rulers. Okay, so if your rulers are busy measuring in points, the measurements you're seeing in that info palette might not make sense. So once you've switched that, then it should make sense what you're seeing here. So if the numbers seem a bit weird, just go and check what your actually increments are.
How did you change that? Sorry.
And this applies to all the programs, by the way. What I'm showing you here is for every program. You go up to the name of the program, whether it's Photoshop or InDesign, go into settings, and you'll see you can change a lot of things about how the program handles measuring and all sorts of other stuff. So I just went to units and rulers, and I said don't measure my rulers in points, measure them or pixels or anything else. Measure them in millimeters, please, because that's what's going to make sense to me. Okay, so just have some sort of guideline on there, even if they're not perfect. Don't stress about it, just throw something on there. As close to what you think 3mm looks like. It's not, for this one, if you're wanting really accurate measurements, then make templates and things in Illustrator, because you can be super accurate with the placement in Illustrator. That's why it's used for packaging. So as basically what you're trying to do for yourself is say, look, I really shouldn't put artwork too close to the edge. One, it's going to be chopped off by my 3mm bleed, and then margins as well just help you not get things too close to the edge. So it's called a safe area. So once you've got that set up, the next step is to go and get your images. So let's just start off with one and make sure you have layers showing. So if your layers palette is not showing, go to the window menu and look for the layers palette. There it is. Look for that and have that open on screen, because that's really the thing we're going to work a lot with. Right, the next step is to go and say place linked. You can place embedded as well, but we want to keep links to things. So we place links, place linked, and go and find the folder of images. Oh, those are the smaller ones. I don't want those. So hopefully yours are, no, I'm not sure which ones are.
All the LK
They're all
ones.
the 600? All of these?
Yeah.
Okay.
I hope, based on...
Yeah, okay, well, which one is the lighter one?
So the low density one is the lighter. Is that black and white one? Is that what you mean?
No, which was the lightest one, the watercolour?
Oh, the watercolor one?
The watercolour? Okay. So that one, I'm just going to go select it and say File, Place. It's going to do its thing. Okay, now this is what I was talking about with the fact that we've done an A4 image, but we want it to fit to A3. At this point, it's still going to behave kind of like a vector image, which means anything you're bringing in, this is a good time to resize it. So if you've scanned it in at 600, you can drag the whole thing up and fit it right to the edge there. See, it's overlapping the edge, but you can see that this little bit here is going to be sliced off. That's going to disappear in the bleed. So if that's not your intention, if you wanted the image to sort of end, in here somewhere, this is your chance to decide, how big the image is going to go. The nice thing about scaling it right up to the A3, so say in your design you realised you didn't have enough room for some of the type, you could decide not to scale it all the way to the edge. This is where, now you're designing and you've got to incorporate typography. We're not going to do the typography in Photoshop. If we're going to do something really interesting, we might design it separately in Illustrator, or we're going to put it on there when we're in design. So especially the smaller type, that's going to come on in design. But you did a layout. You did 2 roughs. So you've got a rough that you're looking at where you have a bit of an idea, gosh, I probably am going to put my type right up here. So where do I want this thing? What does my rough look like? So have your rough in front of you, because it will help you make decisions about this rescaling at this point. It's not that you can't rescale it later, you can. But when you get it to the size you want, I'll go right to the A3, assuming that's what you want. I don't know. Okay? And so this is the thing, we are going to lose a little bit in that will be clipped off. So it's also something to think about, now you know this happens, when you're actually doing the illustrations and the artwork, is thinking, well, if there's going to be bleed, I need to do a little bit of extra colour so that I don't have to lose. Now we're going to lose a bit of the finger there, and that could actually really matter in terms of how people perceive it and read it as a hand. So it's just something to be aware of, and by doing this project you're starting to think about this stuff. But also, is my type going to fit on here? What's the plan, Lena? Is it supposed to be this big? Is the type going up here?
I had the text in all those white triangles.
Right, so this size, we're going this size, yeah, okay. So when you're happy with it, just hit return, or you'll see there's a little tick at the top, and you'll see that it's got that little link. So at the moment, it's linked, it's a smart object, and it's linked to the original. So what that means, it's like the Photoshop mock-ups you've already had a go at using. When you double click on that, it'll open in a separate window, except it's not behaving well because it's opening in preview. So you'd have to reset the what the link opens in, and we can do that in preferences. But we could edit it there. There might be a reason you want to edit the original and not in here. However, for this project, you don't need that link anymore, but sometimes you do. Okay, sometimes you need to keep the link. So it's behaving like a smart object, linking back to the actual original, which you can open in Photoshop, make a change, and it updates here. So we're going to disable that link now by going Layer, Rasterize, Smart Object. So without doing that, what you've got is say a logo you bring in, a logo created in Illustrator, you might be putting it in here and you do not want to rasterize it. You want to keep it crisp vector because you're not going to edit it, you're not going to do anything to it. So there are times when you don't want to do this, but for us, this is an illustration and we want to make it paintable and I can do stuff with it. And if I go and get a paintbrush tool, where are they hiding? There's a lot of things I can't do in terms of editing the file. Yeah, see it's telling me this smart object must be rasterized before proceeding. Yeah, so you just can't paint on it or do anything or edit it if you don't rasterize it. Okay, so try placing embedded just to see what that looks like in contrast. If you go back and then pick one of your other ones, for example, and let's bring in, is that a background?
Yeah, that's just the background.
Yeah, so let's just bring in the background and place it. And notice the place embedded doesn't turn it into a smart object. So if you know you don't need the link, like it's not a logo or something like that, then you can just do place embedded. So it's quicker, and you can still scale it up. Oh, it is still doing it. Sorry, I'm wrong. It's still doing it. So you're still going to have to do layer, smart object, rasterize. And so maybe that's, I do a bit of resizing at this point, but not enough. Not a problem. You can always go back to the edit menu, transform scale. So at any point during this process, you can use the scale tool to scale it up. In Photoshop, you do not need to hold down the Shift key. If you do, you'll find it will actually start distorting. It allows you to kind of distort it, which you basically want to really avoid. So I don't know why Adobe's done that, it's the only program. So just scale it up to right to come outside what you know is the bleed area, and then hit return. Now I've got my background on top and my image below. So to reverse that, you just click on the layer out here and drag, hold the mouse down and drag, and you can stack things up, and you might want to have a go at that. So one of the things you'd want to do, if this is sitting on top and you wanted to see the background, is to use your selection tools, and you did quite a lot of this when we did the wrapping paper project. You had to remove a background. So with this one, it's super easy, but with some things, if they're a bit faint and a bit too soft, before you do that, you might want to look at it and go image, adjust, and look at levels. So with scans, they often come in very soft, and you need to kind of give the colours a bit more punch. It's like they get a little bit desaturated, or they get a bit overexposed. So this one Lena's done to the USB, so it's a bit darker, so it shouldn't be overexposed. So that just means our whites actually still got a little bit of tone on them. If we go to levels, if I just drag the little black slider up, you can see, I'll do it radically, and you can see how it's affecting the dark tones. So that just adds, just bringing that up just a little bit, adds a little bit more punch. This one's for the mid-tones, so if I thought my mid-tones were too light or too dark, I could sort of do that. But just be careful with what happens to your highlights. The highlight slider is the one that you often, if an image is too dark, you would work with. If it's too soft, you probably don't need to touch it. You can see on this little graph, she's got a lot of highlight values. They're not missing like the dark ones were. So if I start doing that, that's the effect the scanner does. So that's why I was suggesting to you, if you have something that's very light and you want to keep the very soft tones, use the scan to USB function, because you can increase the density and get a darker scan. There's no problem lightening the scan, but there's a problem if your scan is already like this, with the highlights missing, you can't bring it back. There's no magic to bring it back. If it's a bit dark, not a problem. So it's actually got the pixels there to work with. But if there are no pixels, well, maybe you can fix it, but it'll take a lot of time to clone bits of other parts of it. Yeah, don't worry about it. So just think about that. So have a look at it, and sometimes with a softer image, that'll help you then go and you'll maybe find the edge better, for example. So have a look at the best tool to use, which one of these. Yours is very straightforward, it's got a sharp edge. You might just go straight to the object selection tool and just drag over the page and see what you get. I don't know what it's got. It seems to have done a pretty good, let me zoom up to see. Well, no, it's okay, but look what it's done here. So I'm going to do Command D and try, just try a different tool until I'm happy with it. So you've got your quick selection tool, you could just drag out here. See, it's got the edge, it's not too bad. And I might just turn off that edge, that second layer, so we can just kind of see what it's doing. And hit the delete key. But it's a bit of a rough edge on hers. So there is another tool if you wanted a straight edge. If you think it's a colour area, the magic wand is good for that. Remember we did this in the previous project. But with a straight line, you've got the polygon lasso tool, which for your design might actually be better, because you can get that and get a straight line on the page. What's it doing?
Did you remove it or mask?
Yeah, I don't know. I just must have bumped it then. So I'll just Command D that. I'll zoom back out. Yeah, I must have bumped it. Yeah.
You're just removing it, not masking it, right?
Yeah, I'm just removing it completely. Yeah. Because, look, we want to be able to see things below. Okay, so that's your first kind of task, is to get rid of it and use the tool that you think is your best friend for getting things. There is, of course, the other options: quick selection, magic wand, object selection. Any of those is going to do a pretty good job. And the selection brush tool is really great as well. So the selection brush tool, remember, that's the one that you can just actually select an area. I'll do a bigger brush, and then when you click off, you'll see that that's become a selection, and I could delete that. Why I want to do that to yours, I don't know. Yes, so I'll just undo that, Command Z. But you pick the tool that's best suited to get rid of the areas that you don't want. Like I say, in Lena's case, I think it would be, using the magnetic tool, this polygon lasso tool, because she could avoid having a fuzzy edge by, clicking, and getting a really neat line. I haven't done a very good job of it, but you could actually come in a little bit even till you get rid of, because yours has got a slightly fuzzy line. Hold down the Shift key to get straight lines, and then rejoin it. Like I said, I didn't do a fabulous job of that, but you can spend a bit more time. So just do whatever tool works for that. I'll just do it really quickly now. I'll just use the quick selection tool and just quickly get rid of it. But note, the quick selection tool does leave you with a bit of a fuzzy edge. See how it's doing that? It's not the best. it's going to do that. So again, I think your polygon tool would, help you avoid that, or you could even use your magic wand tool. But look at the problem with the magic wand. The light values here are too close to that. So, you just have to, experiment to what's the best tool for your particular situation. And in this case, we'll just polygon lasso. Hold down the shift key. It's just a bit like using Illustrator. So that's that one done. Now, just to think about how you can work with the background, that background's a bit too light. Yeah. So I could do levels, make it really dark, but it's too intense. I could go image, adjust and invert the colours. So it does become dark and suddenly I've got some contrast. But there is another thing I wanted to show you, which is using what's called a gradient mask. So to try this, you want to be on the top layer and you want to put a mask. We'll do it both ways. I'll demo both ways. So basically, we can allow parts of this bottom image to come through into the top image or the other way around. So the mask tool is here, this little radio button. You need to be on the layer that's on top to put that on. And then you can do a gradient mask, or you can do with the paintbrush, you can actually paint on that. However, there's a few things to think about. The black fill needs to be on top. That's like 100% going to chop through. So if I want to now have a go at it, instead of painting something, I'm actually chopping through this top layer, but it's a mask. It's not actually editing any pixels out. So I'll just have a go at it. I don't know how big I need to go a bit bigger with my size. So imagine I decide I want that bottom layer to kind of come through into the hair. Okay, so that's what it's starting to do. It's starting to bring it through, but that's not very subtle. Okay, so what if I've got, something underneath and I want to bring it through just into the eyes or something, much more subtle? You can play around with your brush tools. So your brush tool, instead of being at 100% opacity, you can take it right down, and this is a bit like behaving like a watercolour, kind of. It's just really softly bringing that. And if you look at the mask, I've got not a black sort of blob there, and also what kind of brush. So a softer brush is going to be better than a harder brush, so you won't get a weird edge. So you can literally use this like a watercolour to bring something through from below. The other way of doing it is, just undo all this, is to actually, I'll take that mask off and do it the other way. So imagine my whole poster, can you please come up, is like that, and I want to bring some of the lower layer through, exactly the same thing, and exactly the same way. And sometimes what I do to know what's there is I'll make this layer slightly transparent so I can see what I'm doing. So I can actually see a bit of it, but it's hard to tell what's going on. So, but anyway, you can just do it intuitively. You can just sort of start, and it's a bit like a watercolour effect. So see what I'm doing here? I'm painting on it, not on the mask. See what's happening? Yeah. I forgot, and I'm painting with a colour. Okay, so you got to do this step. You got to be on the mask and make sure, just think of black forward is 100% chopped through, but I can make it partly chopped through by doing 36%. So now I can do this really subtle thing where I just allow parts of that image to come through the background. So guys, you do not have to do this in your poster, but I want you to have a go at learning the technique, because it's really useful for lots of things. One of the things I use masks a lot for is where I've got a photograph that's got too much going on and I want a black panel over the top, but I don't want a hard black panel. And you can create an area of plainness for the type to sit on. So it could be something like that. So it's a very useful technique. And one more thing I want to show you before you get overloaded is this, which is the overlay mode. So this is kind of fun as well. So I'll just undo again. And we're going to spend all next week doing this, yeah? So you're going to have plenty of time. So in overlay mode, you can actually play around with how the whole layer interacts with another layer. And sometimes just go running through these, you'll go, like for instance, I think that's a really cool effect. I'll keep that. If at some point I've done that and it's one of my experiments and I want to keep it, I would actually need to go and save this and call it experiment whatever, and keep it as a separate file. You can do snapshots. So you can take snapshots all the way through. Where's that gone? Somewhere here. But it's temporary. So as soon as you close the file, any of your experiments you might have done in that session just disappear. So it's only a temporary thing. So if you really like an experiment you've done, just save it as a new version. Or, you know, for the sake of our brief and the evidence of experimenting, just do a screenshot. Yeah? Of some of the things you're doing, but at the point where you think, actually, I think I might be interested in using that one, then save that file with a different name. Just call it, you know, version 1, version 2. So just play around with these overlay modes. They're really nice to work with. They can do all sorts of things you wouldn't have expected, like that's really unexpected, you know. And of course, you can use selections. You've got a ghostly version, and so on. So that is the main stuff. Any of the adjustments, so I'll go back to normal now. So that's normal. Any of these things in the adjustment panel you could use. So we have selected colours, good, but the main things like hue, saturation, you know, if you feel like you want to soften the colours and make them less colourful, then instead of making them black and white, which you couldn't then combine with your coloured image background, you just desaturate. Like that's now black and white effectively. I've taken all the colour out, but it's still within a colour file. So I could still, if I did that, I could still put a layer mask on it and I could check that that's black forward, get my paintbrush tool, and I could actually, again, sort of paint some colour into that, you know, or I could use it more conventionally and actually, you know, paint colour on. If you decide you want to add, you know, paint some colour and overlay it, make a new layer on top. Because if you do something on that layer and you've actually painted on it, you might regret it and want to get rid of it. And if it's on a separate layer, say I decide I want to make some red on her cheeks, by putting it on a separate layer, but also notice I'm not painting it 100%. I'm doing a really soft, you know, effect. And again, I could play with the overlay modes, but it's actually just a temporary thing, so I'm not stuck with it. But I could just, you know, play around with multiply. Multiply is a good one. Notice multiply is used a lot because it allows the texture and all the detail of whatever image you've got underneath to just pop through without having to do a paint or without having to do a mask. So you might find something interesting happens, you know, with these experiments. I don't mind that. You know, if I'd done a better job of where I put it, that could be useful for colorising it in just one area. So sometimes you just want to pop colour into the eyes, for example. So then make a new layer and then experiment with the overlay and the colour and the opacity. Notice I've got it right down, so it's soft. So I'll get rid of that layer because I don't think I want it. I'll just bin it. Now the last thing I'm going to talk about before I stop, and again, we're going to be in class doing this all next week, so you'll be doing this with me here. But just do remember to take, you know, at least some screenshots of your experiments next week. The other thing I wanted to encourage you to try is just overlaying some of your different versions. So let's just try that. This is presuming that you've kept your sizes good.
Yeah.
Then you can
the
go and
details are a little bit.
they might be a bit wonky. So what's another one that you did? You did
Well, the acrylic paint will probably overlap better.
which one?
The acrylic one.
Acrylic?
Might
This one?
overlap,
Yeah,
yeah.
well let's just place that.
The eyes will line up better.
Yep, so she's got another one she did in acrylic. So we'll just try zooming that up. And then you can have a go at aligning them, because it probably won't line up perfectly. But if you take the opacity temporarily down on the top layer, you can start to see if it is aligning. And you can start to see the potential for how that could interact. Yeah, so I might have to tweak that. I might have to fiddle around with the alignment. I might not be perfect. That's okay. If it's kind of like proportionally not right, just get it roughly right. And then again, we want to rasterize it. And then get your edit transform. And you can try your scale tool, and you can even have a go at warp, and you can push and pull it around. So it's kind of, you know, any of these tools would work. Scale, you might be able to just stretch it slightly sideways. If that doesn't work, you know, like experiment with those. You've got distort, which will let you kind of bring it out independently of the other measurements. So you might find you can, you know, just manually line it up a bit better. But the thing is, because if you're just using it as an overlay or to paint through, it doesn't actually matter because it'll be there. So if I go up to 100% now and just pop that under, and I'll turn that other layer, my other one off, it's getting confusing. And again, I could just select that area. But this one, yeah, I can now, if I paint on this mask, I could use the mask to bring through some of that acrylic stuff that you've done. And maybe I want it at a bigger opacity this time because I want to sort of bring in some harder edge things. And I still would probably need to get rid of these triangle areas if I didn't want them. So you'd still need to trim it down so you can see what it actually looks like. So I'll just do that very quickly. Sorry, quick. It's a bit like the Illustrator pen tool, this one. You've got to rejoin it. So sometimes, for example, the scraper board one, if you've done one of those, looks great on top, and you can just paint some colour through. So something like that, and so we start to see how it might look if you were bringing that through. But I think you definitely want to get rid of that background if you were going to do this. No, can't see what I've done. It's going along the margin. Okay, don't like that. I'll just do it very roughly. Otherwise it would be too long. Oops, lost the plot with that. Just to get that away. Alright, does that make sense to everybody as a first step? That's what you'll be doing, is kind of having a go at different layers. Hi guys, I'm actually recording this, so if you could shush. Okay, and just check that's on that layer, so I need to delete that. Command D to deselect. So back on this top layer, you can see I've painted through, just on the arms, I've painted through that bottom texture. And another thing you can do if you want to be really selective about how it behaves, the bottom layer, again, you could draw a selection with any of these tools, even with the lasso tool, and say I just wanted to paint through much more carefully into the arm area, but not into the face. I could actually make a selection here, and that would mean that when I'm painting on this layer, I won't accidentally paint through and get that overlapping and have to, redo it. So if I look at that now, that's doing something quite unexpected and different. And again, I can do more crazy stuff by just using these overlay tools. Now look at that. Multiply just does really interesting things. Always try multiply. It's a really good layer modify tool. Look at that one. That's overlay. Multiply and overlay are often really good go-tos with something like this. And, what we're after is something that you didn't expect. It's not actually the same as the illustration you started out with. It's an improvement. It's a richer, more interesting experience. This one's hard light. Look at what that's doing. That's fabulous. I would take a screenshot at this stage and go, okay, that's really cool. I'd like to, or if I really liked it a lot, I would just save it as a new document, a new version, because I think actually I might want to work with that. So vivid light, I'm just going through all of them. Did I like any of them? Did any of them look like they would actually work? Even that one, look at the hue one, look at what that's doing. I've got a completely different graphic now than what I started with, and that's what I'm talking about with your stuff. You need to do a bit of this sort of thing, yeah? Look at that, but definitely multiply is always a go-to, and it can often save you from a lot of masking work. Colour burn, not so much maybe, but the other one is overlay. Overlay is terrific. But then just have a look at all of them, just run through really quickly. I got to luminosity and I got that, and I'm like, oh wow. But you can isolate the effects of things, especially if you're painting on the mask, you can isolate it to just painting through, you've probably seen it before, you have a drawn face and you want to put photographic eyes in. You can do that. You just put the photo of the eyes underneath the drawing and paint the iris through, and it looks startling. It's amazing. We've done well. It's like seamlessly. This is a nice surprise thing. Anyway, I think that's enough for this lesson, and I will save this